Today we will be watching a pivotal race, a debate in this race, which may or may not bring the out of favorability incumbent Republican Senator Cory Gardner into maybe in play for this Senate seat, or could cement further the lead that John Hickenlooper, the popular former governor of Colorado, that he has right now. You have to check out this debate, of course. This seat could determine whether or not we keep the Republican majority, but probably not. I would wager to say that Cory Gardner has a 70% chance of losing as of right now. He could tick that up a little bit if he can do a good job, but we'll see. Cory Gardner, who votes pretty well with Trump, he's not known as a moderate, but he's not known as far-right either. He seems like an inline Republican, which is a good thing. But in Colorado, where Trump lost it by 5% and is looking to lose it again by 6 to 7%, I mean, honestly, we look kind of screwed in the Senate seat. But again, Cory Gardner did pull off almost a miracle by winning in 2014 in a red wave year. We'll see what he does in a presidential year.
And yes, they are socially distanced and following all coronavirus protocols.
And subscribe, okay?
Yes, both are being tested regularly. And a quick reminder about the rules for tonight's debate. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer most questions, 30 seconds to answer follow-up questions. We will also ask specific yes or no questions throughout the debate. And this goes without saying, but we are asking both candidates to please refrain from interrupting one another. We have a lot of territory to get through tonight, so we must, of course, start with the pandemic. And we have seen the consequences. Economic devastation, especially for the lowest wage workers, people of color hit disproportionately, kids and adults struggling with mental health, suicides climbing. On Monday, the president tweeted, "Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life." 2,000 Coloradans have died. Another 75,000 have been diagnosed with coronavirus during the pandemic. So, Mr. Gardner, let's start with you. As a member of the Senate, are you proud of the way the Republican majority is handling the pandemic?
We have to improve our work each and every day. Republicans and Democrats coming together, working with our state elected officials to do the job to help us get through this pandemic. I'm proud of the work that I've done with Governor Polis to provide hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 tests for Colorado that I helped secure from Korea. In fact, Governor Polis said much of what we had to respond early on was because of the work that we did with Taiwan and South Korea as well. So I'm excited to continue the work we need to do for the people of Colorado, including additional relief in the Paycheck Protection Program, additional dollars for unemployment benefits. I'm proud to support those efforts to fight for more each and every time. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a bill on the floor of the Senate to make sure that we had a chance to support Coloradans to extend unemployment benefits, to allow businesses a second loan. Unfortunately, John Hickenlooper opposed that vote on the Senate floor. He would have voted no. The difference between John Hickenlooper and I is I believe this is about the people of Colorado. It's not about him, and that's what he thinks it is. This is about supporting the people of Colorado.
So the question was, are you proud of the way the Senate is handling? So let me ask you, are you proud of the way the president is handling the pandemic?
Well, we have to do work each and every day to make sure that we are proud of our response. The fact is, we shouldn't be proud of anybody who passes away. The fact that we've had 2,000 lives lost, the hundreds of thousands of lives we've seen in the United States lost. This isn't a question of pride. This is a question of getting through this together. I believe we must get through this by staying together, staying united. That's what we do in Colorado. It's not a question of being proud. It's not a question of pride. It's a question of standing together to fight a pandemic that doesn't care about Republicans or Democrats getting it.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. So, Mr. Hickenlooper, Senator Gardner has said you did not prepare Colorado well enough for a pandemic. And what's your response to that?
Well, first let me just say that Jared Polis, who endorsed me, I think has done a remarkable job of addressing the pandemic response from a state level. And certainly we did communication tabletops. The whole point of them is to improve systems. We did that. But the bottom line is that President Trump has, from the very beginning, his negligence in identifying the real challenge and the risk of COVID-19, and then the incompetence of the response once they finally owned up to it, that has made our consequences more severe than any industrialized, or pretty much any industrialized country in the world. Our economy is upside down, and we still can't get additional resources, additional relief for people who've lost their jobs, their businesses. They're trying to figure out how they're going to make rent, how they're going to put food on the table. And in Washington, it's the same as it ever was. And Cory Gardner is part of that status quo that doesn't get things done.
And I'm asking about Colorado. Did you prepare Colorado well enough?
Yes, I think we put in place the processes by which you can continuously improve whatever disaster you have.
Thank
when
you.
I first got it,
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you. No, we're going to continue on with the health care questions. Let's move on. Caitlin continues.
This question is for Mr. Gardner. You voted 9 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act. If that effort finally succeeds or the Supreme Court strikes it down, what replaces it? And please be as specific as possible.
Well, thank you, Caitlin. And I think you just heard Governor Hickenlooper admit that he did not prepare the state of Colorado for the pandemic. His own tabletop exercises prove that in the audit that the state of Colorado performed. Look, there are 2 things that Republicans and Democrats agree on when it comes to health care. One, we will protect people with pre-existing conditions, and that's why I've introduced legislation to protect people with pre-existing conditions. 2 is that the Affordable Care Act needs to be replaced. I believe in a patient-centered plan. The idea that a patient and their doctor ought to be making decisions. It's based on risk pools and reinsurance. In fact, I helped make sure that the state of Colorado received a waiver for the reinsurance program to help drive down costs. That's what the Colorado state was seeking. I helped them achieve that and grant that from HHS. It's making sure that we have association health plans that work. It's making sure that we have pre-existing condition coverage to drive down the cost of care, increase the quality of care. John Hickenlooper's plan would take 178 million insurance policies away from the American people. He believes in a government-run system that puts the bureaucrats in charge. It's like getting a colonoscopy at the DMV.
Well, I just want to give you 30 seconds to respond because I didn't really hear a plan that you have for what would actually replace the Affordable Care Act.
Well, thank you. I just talked about the plan. Number 1, we will make sure that we have coverage for pre-existing conditions. That's why I've introduced legislation to do just that. The plan is based on reinsurance and risk pools to make sure that we have association health plans, insurance across state lines, to make sure that we drive down unnecessary procedures that drive up the cost of medical care. It's estimated by about 25%. We can reduce those costs. The plan is to make sure that we empower citizens, empower constituents, the patients, and not empowering somebody like Chuck Schumer or Congress to be in charge of their health care. Remember, what John Hickenlooper's plan would do would lead to Medicare for all, which is health care for none. 178 million people would lose their health insurance as a result, and it would increase payroll taxes by $2,300
Thank you very much, Mr. Gardner. Mr. Hickenlooper, many parts of the Affordable Care Act have been repealed or struck down in the past 10 years, but some big provisions remain, like insurance marketplaces, protecting pre-existing conditions, and being able to keep children on your insurance until they're 26 are still in effect. Should Democrats focus on restoring things like the individual mandate or craft something new?
Well, first, let me just take a moment. And Cory is a fast speaker, very slick. I think you're going to hear tonight a lot of attacks. You're going to hear distortions, exaggerations, some outright lies. Let's answer this question. The Affordable Care Act provided, not universal coverage, but dramatically increased coverage in this country, and did, as you point out, provide for relief for kids in that in-between age, and they could stay on their parents' plan, protections for pre-existing conditions. I believe we have to build on the Affordable Care Act. I mean, that's what Barack Obama built as a foundation. And I think a sliding scale public option gets us a long way there. Cory says that he has a bill that'll provide for protecting for people, extending the protections for pre-existing conditions. That there's no there. They've had a number of 5 different fact checkers say it's a sham. Channel 9, the other station, called it horse excrement.
All right, gentlemen, we are going to move on to some yes/no questions as related to health care. And when I address you directly, please respond with a yes or no. Vice President Biden supports dropping the enrollment age for Medicare from 65 to 60 while making those extra years optional. Do you support that idea, Mr. Gardner?
I'm sorry, the question was to drop the age of Medicare eligibility?
Yes.
Well, I support more people who can get more access to Medicare as long as it is sustained and firm.
So it is a yes? You agree
as long as I understand the plan
60?
correct. I've not read the Vice President's plan, but if it's more people getting into the care that they've been promised and we protect Medicare, then of course.
Thank you. Mr. Hickenlooper?
Well, it has to be part of a package, but yes, I support given all the all the balancing that goes on.
Thank you. Again, this is a yes or no. Would you vote in favor of a Medicare for all bill? Mr. Hickenlooper.
No.
Mr. Gardner.
No, but that's exactly what John Hickenlooper's plan is. He has said it before.
Gardner,
it's his quote.
Excuse me. Do you believe the federal government should be able to negotiate lower drug prices across the board? Mr. Gardner.
Yes, and we've been working on that.
Mr. Hickenlooper?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Thank you. And our next question comes from Justin Wingirder of the Denver Post. Justin?
Thank you. Mr. Hickenlooper, we will begin with you. Do you think the government should send out another round of stimulus checks?
Is this a 1 minute answer? Yes, or yes or no?
1 minute question, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yes, absolutely. And I think the fact that it's been 6 months and Washington still can't get its act together is shameful. I mean, we are dealing with people that have lost so much, families that are on the edge of bankruptcy, literally having trouble to put food on the table. I think that we need to recognize we've got to provide support for our schools so they can open safely. Let's make sure we finally get sufficient testing capacity so everybody who needs it can get it, allow our small businesses to open safely. We also need to make sure we have enough protective equipment so the small businesses and the schools all can open safely. We have to make sure we get some resources for local governments and state government to make sure they can do well. Cory Gardner and the Republican senators have been boxing themselves in, allowing themselves not to make any negotiations for 6 months. This has been going on for 6 months. Only in Washington could you have such stagnation and call it good politics.
Mr. Gardner, your response not only to my question, but Mr. Hickenlooper's accusations.
Well, thank you. Look, I have supported expanding loans to businesses, loan forgiveness to businesses to keep their doors open. There's a business owner in Monument, Colorado, Rosie's Diner, that is in business today because of the PPP loan. I spoke to a business this morning in Greenwood Village that is around today because of a PPP loan, and they need more assistance. That's why I supported several weeks ago on the floor of the United States Senate a bill that would have done the things that John Hickenlooper just said needed to be done. It would have provided $100+ billion to schools. It would have provided dollars for testing. It would have provided dollars for businesses. It would have provided dollars for personal protective equipment. That bill would have passed the Senate had we had bipartisan support. Unfortunately, John said he would have voted no because he believes it's more important to play politics than providing relief for the people of this state. Because that's what you get with John. You get somebody who's willing to violate the state's constitution and ethics. You get somebody who's willing to vote no on relief and then tell the people of Colorado that they need more. It's not about you.
That bill would not have included
That was
stimulus
awesome.
checks. Do you support sending stimulus checks?
That was
Oh, absolutely.
awesome
We need
by
to
Gardner.
support stimulus
Very
checks, but
slick,
the stimulus
very
checks that
cool.
we sent out through the CARES Act, John's actually criticized that bill as well. The relief that the American people need was on the floor, with more coming just a few weeks ago. But to be clear, John said he would have opposed that. Now, is that a power grab? Is that because he believes it's to his advantage to say, let's wait until after the election and maybe we can use this for our political gain? You know, earlier this summer, John was convicted by the state's Independent Ethics Commission because he believed the laws could be used for his own gain, ignoring the laws at the expense of the people of Colorado. That's what you see, the same thing happening with coronavirus relief.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Can I
All right,
respond
Yeah,
to
please, 30 seconds,
Oh,
Mr. Hickenlooper.
please, Mr. Hickenlooper.
his attacks? You know, the bottom line is that bill was going to cut the extended insurance, extended unemployment by 2/3. It was going to not provide any money for local governments or state governments. It was going to provide little or no support for schools trying to reopen. I mean, think about these schools. Kids want to go to school and learn. Their parents want them to go to school. The teachers want to teach, and they don't have the resources to do it. And right now, their local economies are so upside down, they can't do it all themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because he
both.
actually got it wrong. That bill did include
Thank you
money
very
for
much, Mr.
education.
Gardner.
It included
We are
more
actually
money
going
than
to
that. Well, he
move
got
on.
several
Thank
things
you.
wrong. If I could just
Thank you.
correct what he said right. He got the bill wrong, and I think it's important that we set the record straight.
And
$105 billion for education, more money than the House would have provided, was in that bill. We had dollars for schools. We had a dollar for coronavirus protection in there, and he said he would have voted no. He didn't even
you, Mr.
understand the
Gardner.
bill that he says he would vote no
And
on.
Mr.
It's not
Hickenlooper, we're going to
about
let
you.
you have the last word on this so that we can move on to the next topic.
Well, I just think that we see again so many words.
It's the truth.
And the distortions and exaggerations. I trust everyone's going to be able to see through this over the course of this debate. We need to make sure that we get relief to the people that need it. And the Republicans control the Senate, they're able to bring this bill forward. They're able to negotiate. But over 6 months, they haven't done it. It's the same as it ever was.
All right, gentlemen, we are moving on. Caitlin Kim has our next question.
Mr. Gardner, you keep touting your ranking as being the third most bipartisan senator, which is based on how many bills you've co-sponsored with Democrats. But your voting record shows you've backed the president nearly 90% of the time, according to the website 538. How do you square those two?
Because I vote 100% of the time with the people of Colorado. Let's talk about some of those successes that I've had for the state. I've brought the Bureau of Land Management headquarters, opened up right here in Colorado. I've opened up U.S. Space Command in Colorado Springs. I just passed the Great American Outdoors Act, which has been identified by the Nature Conservancy as the most significant conservation accomplishment in over 50 years, a bill they described as the holy grail of conservation. I led the funding and legislation to complete the Aurora VA Hospital, to create a 988 suicide prevention hotline, a bill that will save lives right here in Colorado. Every single one of them took bipartisan support. Every single one of them was about us bringing Republicans and Democrats together, not as a byproduct, but to begin it from the very beginning, to convince President Trump that we needed to pass the Great American Outdoors Act. That's what we did. That's bipartisanship. Now, what you hear from John is he's not even going to support a Republican-led relief effort because apparently the Republicans control the Senate and he doesn't think it was good enough, even though it contains the very things he wants.
Well, Senator, really quickly, do you believe that 100% of Coloradans support 90% of President Trump's agenda?
Look, I'm going to support Colorado. I'm going to vote with Colorado every single time, and I believe that's what I have done, and that's what I will continue to do. You know, John Hickenlooper actually called the Great American Outdoors Act meaningless. He called the 988 suicide prevention bill meaningless. He said the bills that Cory Gardner has passed are mostly meaningless. The 988 bill that's going to save lives is meaningless. The Great American Outdoors Act that's going to put thousands of Coloradans to work is meaningless. Look, John is convinced that this race is about him. You can't trust John Hickenlooper because while he was in Colorado, he took money from the taxpayers to pay for his own law.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Mr. Hickenlooper, the next question is for you. Every senator goes to Washington vowing to fix the system. Over a year ago, you said you didn't want that job. Take a listen.
I respect senators. Some of my best friends are senators. I don't think I'm cut out for that.
There were a number of old friends. Ken Salazar was one. A couple of my neighbors came and they said, you realize it's a different job than being the CEO of a small business. It's a different job than being a mayor or a governor, but it's the same skills. It's bringing people together to find common ground to get things done. And I called up a number of former governors who'd gone on to become senators. And I said, can you really feel like you make a difference? Do you like it? Is it rewarding? And every one of them said, you'll love it. And you're just what we need to have a small business person, someone who's built a small business from the ground up and laying awake at night sometimes trying to figure out how you're going to make payroll and dealt with the regulations and then worked at city government and then state government and see how they're supposed to work together. And that's what the Senate needs, is that ability to understand the relationships, but also to get people to work together. What's happening now is all the senators are all pointing fingers at each other. And Cory Gardner's right in the middle of this. They would make you think that the status quo is perfect.
Thank you, gentlemen. We are going to do another yes/no round. And again, same as before, really we're looking for a yes or no answer to this. So if the COVID infection rate rises above 5% in Colorado, would you support another shutdown? Mr. Gardner, yes or no?
No, we can't afford a shutdown in this country.
Mr. Hickenlooper?
Above 5%, the infection rate 5%?
If the COVID infection rate rises above 5% in Colorado, would you support another shutdown?
That's right on the border. I do what the medical professionals suggest, yes.
Thank you. Some people are calling for a national mask mandate right now. Would you support it, yes or no? Mr. Hickenlooper?
National
mask mandate.
No.
Mr. Gardner?
We need to follow the science, the guidances. We need to wear our masks. I wear a mask.
Yes or
but
no?
I think a national mandate goes too far.
Yes or no? Okay,
well, the
thank
answer is
you.
no.
Okay, do you believe a Supreme Court justice should be confirmed before the results of the election are known? Mr. Gardner?
I believe a Supreme Court justice. Yes, I believe. I'm sorry, the question was before the...
Before the presidential election.
Well, I believe we should follow a thorough, transparent process and confirm a justice along that line, as long as the thorough process is fulfilled.
Is it a yes or no?
Well, again, if the process is completed and it's thorough and fair, then yes, we can have that justice confirmed.
Mr. Hickenlooper, do you believe a Supreme Court justice should be confirmed before the results are known?
as Cory Gardner said 4 years ago, the voice of the
It's
people
a
should be
yes or no,
heard.
sir.
So that they should not confirm a justice until the voice
So
of the
that's a
people
no.
can be heard. It's a
Okay,
no.
thank you. And this one is not a yes or no. We'll give you each 30 seconds on this topic. What should be the Senate's top priority right now? A coronavirus package or confirming Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court? So please choose one or the other. Mr. Hickenlooper, you go first.
COVID definitely has to be the primary response has to be to deal with COVID-19 and to make sure that we're dealing with the economy in a constructive way, and especially for those small businesses that are at risk of not being able to reopen. We look at the coffee shops, the restaurants, the hair salons. This has to be a time where we focus on that. The vote of the people should help determine, should allow the next president to decide who is nominated for the Supreme Court.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gardner?
Look, we ought to be focused on COVID. That's why I am focused on COVID. That's why I'm leading with my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, to pass a relief bill now. That's why I voted several weeks ago to pass a coronavirus relief package, a package that John Hickenlooper said he opposed. That bill supported the small businesses that you said you want to support. That bill provided help to the coffee shops and the restaurants and the hardware stores. You said no, because not everything was in that bill that we needed. I agree. But isn't something better than nothing? According to John Hickenlooper, nothing is better than something.
Okay, so
it's
so
all
my,
about you, and it's got to stop.
And my question is, what should be the Senate's priority? So it's a one or the other. Is it coronavirus or
Well, that's
Judge
what I said.
Amy?
It's COVID-19. It's coronavirus. That's why
Thank
we
you.
have to
Okay.
continue this effort. And
I just want to be clear.
unfortunately, John
Thank you.
Hickenlooper would
Thank
have
you
voted
very
against
much.
the relief.
And we are going to move on to another question here. Caitlin, Kim has our next line of questioning.
Mr. Gardner, in 2016, you said the Senate should not confirm a Supreme Court justice before the presidential election. This is what you said at the time.
We are deep in the heart of a political campaign, a divisive election with a divisive president who has done nothing but overreached Congress time and time again. I believe the next Supreme Court justice ought to be chosen by the American people through the election of the next president.
Why do you no longer stand by those words?
Well, look, the Senate will exercise its advise and consent powers, its obligations, like we did in 2016. We followed the precedent in 2016. In 2020, the precedent stands clear. We will follow and oblige our advise and consent requirements of the Constitution. This precedent that we are following goes back to the late 1800s. And I will remind our listeners of this debate what John Hickenlooper did when he was governor of the state of Colorado. When he was governor, in his last term in office, last year in office, 2018, he appointed a justice to the Colorado Supreme Court. So he believes that you can appoint a justice in the last year of a governor's term. So I think that he actually has to square what he said 4 years ago. Don't confirm a justice. Do confirm a justice 4 years ago, excuse me, he said. Now he's saying don't confirm a justice. But yet he himself in 2018 put a justice on the Colorado Supreme Court. But let's talk about the kind of justices or judges that John Hickenlooper supports. He actually put a judge on the bench in Weld County that covered up a cocaine ring. He has another judge on the bench that was a max-out campaign donor to his campaign. I think it's pretty clear the kind of judge or justice that John Hickenlooper wants. It is not about you, John. It is about the people of Colorado, and we need to fight like heck for every person here.
So, Senator, just really briefly, why don't you stand by those words? You didn't talk about precedent in 2016. You talked about
I certainly
letting the
talked
people...
about precedent. You may have picked a clip where I didn't talk about precedent, but the precedent from 2016 is the precedent that we exercised our advise and consent clause powers under, the same as we are doing in 2020, a precedent that has stood since the late 1800s.
Thank you very much, sir.
Can I respond to his allegations about the...
Mr. Hickenlooper, the next question actually is for you, and let me ask that question. If you want to respond as well, you
go
can.
ahead. You could ask yes, fair enough.
Sorry. So in 2016, you said that the Senate should not. You said the Senate should confirm Merrick Garland. Why have you changed your position?
Because back then we had 10 months, just like I had when I made my Supreme Court appointment my last year as governor, which, by the way, Cory Gardner knows that we have an independent bipartisan commission that vets all the candidates and then recommends 3 that the governor can choose from. And it's a process that is considered the gold standard in terms of how you appoint judges. So he knows his allegations really don't carry much water. I look at this as the precedent is right now being twisted to suddenly now the voice of the people in a divisive election with a divisive president, the voice of the people doesn't matter anymore. Why can't we just wait? Let's see who gets elected and let them dominate the next justice. This is going to be a lifetime appointment. There's no reason why we need to rush to judgment. And, Cory Gardner, Donald Trump has made 200 judicial appointments. Cory supported 210 out of 214. A number of them didn't meet the basic standards of the American Bar Association. It's surprising to have him lecturing me about the appointment of judges.
Your justice was actually seated in July, I think, of the election. You're not 10 months out.
Mr. Hickenlooper, we have a 30-second follow-up question for you. If Justice Barrett is confirmed and Biden wins the election, would you vote to increase the size of the Supreme Court, what's known as court packing?
Well, in the first place, I don't think that's going to happen. I continue to have hope that there are enough Republican incumbents running for Senate that they, when the bright lights are turned up and they recognize that their vote is going to violate the will of the American people, they're going to recognize that this is not the time. And I don't think that Amy Coney Barrett's going to get approved. That said, my experience is that generally it's the people, not the institutions, you need to change. Once we get new people into Washington, I think the system will right itself.
Again, would you support court packing?
No, I'm saying that I think that the first task you have to do is you have to go and make sure you get new senators in place, new people, and I think that will change the institution more than immediately changing the rules.
Mr. Gardner, 30 seconds for you as well. Are there any circumstances under which you would support adding a 10th or 11th justice to the Supreme Court?
No, and I'd yield the rest of my time for John Hickenlooper to actually answer the question. He has said in the past that he would be open to court packing. So, no, I don't support court packing. That's what Ruth Bader Ginsburg had said. It's a 150-year precedent with 9 justices. John, you have the rest of the time to answer the question, yes or no, will you pack the court?
I mean, I'm happy to repeat the answer
yes
I gave.
Or no, you got 6 seconds.
No, I'm happy to repeat the answer that I gave. The bottom line is it's the institutions.
You did not say yes or no. Do you
I have
agree?
no intention of.
All right, gentlemen, we are going to move on, and our next questions come from Justin Wingirter of The Post.
Thank you. We're up to Mr. Gardner now. You did not vote for Donald Trump in 2016. You endorsed him in 2019. What changed your mind?
I didn't think Donald Trump could win in 2016, and I desperately wanted to make sure that Hillary Clinton did not win the White House because her ideas were wrong for this country. Her ideas included big government, weak foreign policy, and would have lessened the opportunities for the American people. The choice is clear. The choice is clear in 2020. We have a choice between somebody who's going to create a socialized medicine program, ban fracking, 230,000 jobs in Colorado will be lost, and John Hickenlooper has said he'd be with him every step of the way. John Hickenlooper said that he would support, actually he wants to go further than the Green New Deal. He said he wants to make oil and gas obsolete in this state. Do you know what that means, John? If you make oil and gas obsolete in this state, John, 230,000 Coloradans will lose their job. Is that the kind of economic plan that you have for this state? 230,000 people losing their jobs? These are people that I live with in my neighbors, in my neighborhood, my hometown. They're my family members. And yet we have an administration under Joe Biden and John Hickenlooper, if he gets there, that would destroy our economy.
We will get to oil and gas in a minute, but first of all, are you proud of your support for Donald Trump?
I'm proud of the work that we have done together. I'm proud of the work that we have done for Colorado to bring a Space Command to Colorado Springs, to open up the Bureau of Land Management headquarters here. I'm proud of the work that we've done. So yes, let's be proud of the work we've done. We're going to fight like cats and dogs. We're going to bring people together, but we're going to make sure that we make it about the people of Colorado. Look, you want to know what's wrong with Washington, D.C.? It's because you send people to Washington, D.C. That are dedicated to a partisan fight instead of working together. That's why I'm the 3rd most bipartisan member of the United States Senate to get work done. John thinks it's all about him. That's why he wants to go there. He even admits it.
Sir, I did not hear an answer. Are you proud to support Donald Trump?
Together. Absolutely proud of the work that we've done together because it's been good for the state of Colorado to bring Bureau of Land Management here, to cut taxes and help wage growth. If you look what our state has done, 7% wage growth across the western part of the United States. John Hickenlooper actually wants to repeal the 2017 tax cuts. That would reduce wages.
I think he asked you whether you're going to.
I'm proud of the work we've done, John.
You're proud of your support for President
John,
Trump.
I'm not going to support a socialist, so I'm proud to be, of course, working together to make sure that we don't have a socialist.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Hickenlooper, please, your time to respond.
60 seconds?
You can
30
have
seconds,
60
please.
30 seconds. Okay. So, obviously, I think President Trump's negligence in addressing COVID-19, his complete incompetence and that of his team in responding once they finally recognized the threat is a disgrace, and it's hurt this country as much as any natural disaster in our lifetime. Cory Gardner didn't speak out against that. When President Trump tried to get foreign governments to intercede on his behalf in elections, Cory Gardner didn't speak out. When recently, when the president during his debate said, stand back but stand by to white supremacists, Cory Gardner didn't respond.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Hickenlooper, as Senator Gardner mentioned earlier, you did commit 2 ethics violations while in office. Why should the people of Colorado trust you?
Well, as you know, those were violations of travel I did trying to promote Colorado. We went from 40th in job creation to becoming the #1 economy in the country. Those allegations originally came from a dark money Republican group that was, made originally 97 allegations. Of those, only 2 were violations. They were inadvertent. They were reporting errors. The Denver Post called them honest mistake, relatively minor. I acknowledge, I accept responsibility. We paid the $2,800 fine. But let's refer to where those are coming from. The dark money Republican group recognizes they can't defend Cory Gardner's record. He's trying to roll back the protections for people with pre-existing medical conditions 9 times. That he wants to not just, not address climate change. He wants to roll back protections for clean air and clean water. This is unacceptable by any measure, and they know he can't run on it, so they've spent $20 million in attacking me over the course of the summer. That's Washington politics coming to Colorado, and I don't think I think they see right through it. Coloradans recognize this is a huge amount of attack ads and just cover-ups for the lack of a record that can be defended.
Thank you, Mr. Hickenlooper. We are going to take a break.
If I can respond to that, because he brought my name up, and I would like to respond to it if I could. He did bring my name up.
We're going to take a break. We need to take a break right now, just because
he invoked my name. I apologize.
This is live TV, and we have to take a break right now. So we will
fair.
continue the conversation, I promise, right after this commercial break.
All right, so that's the first break. As you can see, pretty intense, actually. A lot of action going on, and frankly, there's kind of a cognitive dissonance, maybe perhaps, in the audience. The people watching in Colorado must square the fact that Donald Trump is not too popular in the state, and yet we have a guy who's voting 90% with Donald, and that could be seen as a problem. Whereas John Hickenlooper does have a corrupt past.
Particularly working women during difficult times like these. So, Mr. Gardner, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Anne, for this question. If you look at prior to the pandemic, we had record unemployment growth. We had tax cuts that were adding around $1,400 per household in Colorado to household income. The western part of the United States saw wage growth at 7% household income wage growth. Hispanic families saw 65% family wealth increases. African-American families, 33% increases in family wealth. Women were entering the workforce, creating new jobs and opportunities because of the programs, the regulatory systems that we had been able to make more efficient and to encourage investment into startups. The work that we continue to do in the coronavirus relief needs to reflect the effort to make sure that women, men are able to get into the workforce, to keep their businesses open, to get the skills and retools that they need to compete in the future. It's why I've led legislation like the American Innovation and Competitiveness Act to make sure that we have those training opportunities. The bill that I supported a couple of weeks ago would have provided additional dollars for businesses like women-owned businesses across the state of Colorado. John Hickenlooper said he would have voted against that relief. We can't leave people behind. I don't understand why he is trying to do that. And I think the timer may not be working, so I'll stop. I'm sorry.
Yes, you are out of time. Thank you. Mr. Hickenlooper, what policies do you think the federal government needs to advance to protect families, particularly women?
Well, certainly in this time of crisis, the first thing we need to do is make sure that small businesses can reopen. They need to have testing capacity. They need to have protective equipment. All these things that the White House promised 9 months ago, and somehow the Senate promised, and it still hasn't happened. Women are often the small business generators. They start and grow small businesses in disproportional numbers. And in a crisis like this, they're also the ones who often get shut down. And the original CARES Act didn't get enough resources to those truly small businesses. And I think we need to look at how can we make sure that they get not just the skills training, but also make sure that they get access to capital and loans that can be turned into grants if they push through. Make sure that their workers can get the extended unemployment to get through this dark period until the businesses can safely reopen. We also have to make sure that women get paid fairly. And we know in this country they're getting paid, in many cases, 70, 75 cents on the dollar of what men get paid. And it's long overdue that the Senate and Washington should take this on and make sure that it's a level playing field for everyone.
Thank you very much. And our next question comes to us from Rob Quirk with News 5 in Colorado Springs. Take a listen.
And thank you and good evening, Senator, Governor. COVID-19 impacted Colorado's tourism economy in many ways. Now, we've spent months profiling business owners who are eager to rebound, like Chris Hazlitt, who owns Ralph's Break Room in Cripple Creek. Here's what he told us back in April.
I think we're holding our own up here. It's definitely not as much business as we're used to. Unfortunately, I had to lay off my whole staff, and I fully expect to rehire them at some point.
And with the economy working to recover and small business owners trying to rebound, what role should Congress play in helping our tourism communities? Governor Hickenlooper, we'll start with you.
Yes, and as someone who spent, almost 20 years in the restaurant business, I understand the challenges people are facing. I know what it's like to have your own business and be responsible for making payroll, for the welfare and the capacity of your employees to pay their rent and put food on the table. It's a challenge. I think what Congress has got to do is really address this ability to respond. We've got to make it safe for people to feel they can go out and enjoy their lives. And that means we've got to make sure, as I've said multiple times, we have testing capacity. And it's got to be fast. You can't wait 3 or 4 days. Your employees have got to be able to find right away. If they've got a sniffle, they've got to know whether they're going to be contagious. It's for their benefit. It's for their fellow workers' benefit. We haven't gotten sufficient testing capacity even to this day. It's unbelievable. It's unconscionable that Washington can still not have that. Protective equipment, access to more resources, much larger investment than what we saw in the most recent suggestions.
Thank you, Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Gardner, same question. What role should Congress play in helping our tourism communities?
Well, this isn't a case where a restaurant was serving bad food, so it had to close, or a hotel room was dirty, so people stopped going. This is where the government, out of love for our community, said, let's socially distance, let's stop this business for now to get through this. And as a result, the government needs to respond. That's why I'm working on the Restaurant Act to provide $120 billion to keep restaurants open and afloat. It's why I'm a part of the Rehire America plan to help cover the salaries of employees, to make sure that we have fixed costs for businesses covered. It's why I'm a part of the Startup Act. It's why I continue to support legislation like the Paycheck Protection Program to get those dollars into the hands of small businesses. It's quite frankly why we passed the Great American Outdoors Act. The Great American Outdoors Act is the law of the land. It's going to be putting millions and millions of dollars into Colorado to get people hired. I spoke to a business in Colorado Springs, Mama Pearl's Restaurant, here today because of the Paycheck Protection Program. But again, John Hickenlooper thinks it's all about him because he would have voted against the very business relief that the tourism industry needs.
Thank you very much. All right, Justin Wingirter has our next line of questions.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, the New York Times reported on President Trump's taxes. They found in some years he paid nothing, in other years as little as $750. Is that fair? Mr. Hickenlooper, we'll start with you.
No, of course that's not fair. This is exactly what is driving people nuts about Washington. Washington feels that there's 2 sets of rules. And President Trump, we don't know exactly any details about his business. How much is he using his position to benefit his businesses? We know now that he's got huge amounts of debt. We suspect and think it's in certain foreign governments. Is that affecting his negotiations with countries like Russia or China? Why did the U.S. Redirect their energy around Russia and be more, how should I say, benevolent? The bottom line is that everybody should pay their fair share. Cory Gardner supported Donald Trump's $1 trillion tax giveaway, where the largest corporations, the wealthiest individuals, got 83% of the benefit, while so many small businesses, things for working people, were temporary.
Mr. Gardner.
Well, thank you for the question. And this could all be answered if the president would release his tax returns. And I encourage him to do so. Release the tax returns. That answers all of these questions. But John Hickenlooper said that there are two sets of rules that some in Washington play by. Well, let's talk about the two sets of rules that you're playing by, John. You finished this last segment saying that you were found guilty on two small charges. Do you think that violating the state constitution is no big deal? It's nonchalant. It's just a small thing. Do you think the independent ethics committee that found you guilty is actually a dark money group? You appointed some of the members. They're your own appointees, Governor. When it comes to the people of Colorado, you want them to look away when you yourself have two sets of rules. To violate the state constitution, you weren't set free or found innocent on 91 charges. They were outside of the statute of limitations. They were never even brought up. This is about somebody you can't trust because he thinks it's all about him. And if it's all about him, he won't fight for you. Will you waive the statute of limitations?
Would you like to respond, Mr. Hickenlooper?
Well, once again, the incessant distortions and misstatement of facts. The bottom line is that Cory Gardner can't defend his record. And so he's going to keep attacking me all night. We've seen it so far. I don't think it's going to stop at any point. In terms of the bill that he says I wouldn't vote for, at that moment in time, I wouldn't have voted for it. If it was negotiated and it got more money for this, more money for restaurants, for instance, I mean, why isn't the Restaurant Act passed? Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to move on now. Our federal debt, as you well know, is north of $20 trillion at the same time as both parties are discussing another round of coronavirus stimulus. What do you think should be done to get the deficit under control, if anything? Mr. Hickenlooper, we'll start with you.
Well, obviously, somehow you're going to have to pay the piper. We gave the largest tax giveaway to large corporations and wealthy Americans. 83% of that 2017 tax giveaway went to the wealthiest people in this country. And then immediately we went into COVID-19. And as I've said repeatedly, Donald Trump's negligence in recognizing the risk, it now turns out that we know that he did recognize that risk, but he said nothing about it. And that, coupled with compounded by the incompetence of his team, where they cut so many budgets, means that we're upside down. But the way we're going to fight our way out of this is we're going to build our economy from the bottom up, and we're going to build it more equitable. We're going to make sure that small businesses get the resources to grow and hire more people. We're going to make sure that we have support for working people, child care, a decent minimum wage, to make sure that we can have an economy that lets us grow out of this incredible burden that we've been put under by that tax cut.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner, what should Congress do anything about the deficit?
Well, Congress needs to continue to support our economy to get through this economic crisis driven by the pandemic. We also need a balanced budget amendment. We have to cut spending where it makes sense. We have to protect Social Security, Medicare. We have to protect our social safety nets. We have to make sure that we make them as strong as possible while we grow the economy. We need to make sure that we have a regulatory environment that encourages investments, that encourages job creation. Those are the things that we can do to balance our budget to handle the debt and deficit situation. But make no mistake, when John Hickenlooper was governor, what he did, he led the state of Colorado increasing its budget at the highest rate of all states but one. The biggest spending increase of all states but one. I think that state was North Dakota. He supported billions and billions of dollars in tax increases, and he supports them now. When he says he wants to eliminate the 2017 tax cuts, that will increase taxes on Coloradans from corner to corner. Not only that, his economic plan would put people like the coal miners in Craig, Colorado out of business, and he brags about putting them out of business.
Thank
it's
you,
not
Mr.
about
Gardner.
you, John.
Mr. Hickenlooper, yes, 30 seconds to respond, please.
I didn't say any of that. Let's be clear. I've been endorsed by the Commission to protect Social Security and Medicare, and they've been clear that Cory Gardner has voted to make the age at which you qualify for Medicare older, to make it longer before you can get benefits from Social Security. He's voted to cut resources for those institutions. I mean, the bottom line here is that we're going to have to work our way through this economy by working together. And we can't keep pointing fingers and attacking people, calling them names, and endlessly. Well.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to continue on. Caitlin Kim has our next line of questioning.
The median student loan debt for American adults is $17,000. Should Congress be doing something to address this? And if so, what? Mr. Gardner, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you. I'm probably one of the only members of Congress that actually has a student loan. I'm the third youngest member of the United States Senate, and my student loan is proudly held at the University of Colorado. So I understand exactly what this means. Yes, we should. We need to continue the work we're doing on Pell Grants to make it more affordable, college more affordable, to recognize industry programs to make it more affordable. I've passed legislation, had it signed into law, that allows certain education dollars to be used for concurrent and dual enrollments to help make sure that college is actually more is paid for in high school, so you can actually get into high school a year ahead, if not more. When it comes to student loans themselves, I've introduced a bill that would allow employers to pay their employees a portion of their student loan. The employer wouldn't have to pay a tax on that, and the employee wouldn't have to pay an income tax on it. It's connecting people, making it work, and lowering the cost of tuition. Under John Hickenlooper's watch as governor, tuition in Colorado increased by over 65%. $176 million was added to the student loan burden in Colorado under his watch.
Thank you. Mr. Hickenlooper, same question. Should Congress do something about student loan debt?
Well, absolutely, and it's been too long that they haven't. We need to increase Pell Grants, and we should recognize that Cory Gardner has voted 10 times to reduce Pell Grants instead of increase them. We should allow students to renegotiate the interest rate and come down to a lower interest rate. Cory's voted against that on a couple of occasions. He has also refused to increase, allow them to work off the debt that they owe by doing work in rural areas, in healthcare or education. The bottom line is that A, we've got to reduce the cost of college, and B, we've got to allocate more resources. As I said, increase Pell Grants. We've also got to take community colleges and make them a sliding scale, so if you have no money, they're free, so that every kid, no matter what their zip code, knows that they can get a college education, they can get the skills to have a great life. And that's not happening in the present Washington.
All right, thank you.
Because he mischaracterized a bill. I
have
actually
30 seconds.
introduced a bill to make sure that we got more people into rural areas for education, particularly like veterinarians. But John, I know you're saying you want to reduce the cost of tuition today, but under your watch as governor, when you were ahead of the Colorado education system, you were in charge. Tuition increased 65% in Colorado. When you were here in Colorado students had an additional $176 million financial burden added to them under your watch. You want to go to Congress to fix it. Why didn't you fix it when you had 8 years to do it?
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Mr. Hickenlooper, you can respond here.
Yeah, again, to take things out of context, to distort statistics is really never going to get us anywhere. We increased funding from the state for higher education at the largest level in more than a decade. And we looked at, in very difficult budget years, how can we make sure that more kids get to school? We took a model that was originally in just a few cities, but now there are pilots across the state to have apprenticeships. So kids who aren't going to go to college can get that same job opportunity that everyone else gets.
Thank you. All right, our next question, Justin.
Thank you. Mr. Hickenlooper, this came up earlier. In 2018, you appointed a judge in Weld County by the name of Ryan Kamala. He has since pleaded guilty to obstructing a federal investigation into cocaine trafficking. Can you explain why you appointed him?
Well, certainly, and you hear these stories. Colorado has an independent bipartisan commission that goes through all the candidates for every judicial nomination and every judicial appointment. So they would recommend 3 finalists up to the governor's office, and then we had a team of people that would go through and vet them. And I don't remember Judge Kamala. Certainly based on the evidence we've seen, he shouldn't be a judge. But look at what Cory Gardner's done in supporting 210 out of 214 judges that Donald Trump has appointed. Let me tell you, one of those judges was not approved by Cory Gardner because that judge was was not conservative enough. We have to look at, justice. And right now in Washington, what they're trying to do is remake the federal court. They're trying to ram through as many conservative judges in as short a period as they can, and they're sacrificing everything in that pursuit.
Mr. Gardner, would you like to respond?
Well, again, there were 3 appointees that were put forward, 3 nominees that were put forward, and John Hickenlooper chose the one that covered up a cocaine ring. It's not just that. He actually has a justice that was a campaign donor, max-out donor to his campaign. You know, here's the question I have for John, and I'll give you some of my time again. Earlier when we were talking about the court, you said no answer when it came to packing the courts. You've got 5 seconds. Will you vote to pack the courts?
And we're going to move on. I'm sorry, we've already discussed that topic. So our next question comes from Caitlin Kim.
Senator Gardner, your rally with President Trump in Colorado Springs this past February drew quite a crowd. Thousands of people were in attendance, among them people wearing outfits supporting the QAnon conspiracy and members of the Proud Boys wearing matching jackets and leading chants. The Proud Boys are classified as a hate group. President Trump declined to condemn them at the first presidential debate. Mr. Gardner, what is your message to the Proud Boys who came to watch you speak in Colorado Springs and presumably will cast a ballot for you in the coming weeks?
Well, now, I don't know that you can say that because I strongly condemn them in the strongest terms. After Charlottesville, I said we must call hate for what it is, evil for what it is, hate. We must make sure we stop the injustice that we've seen in our communities because of discrimination and hate. There is no room for white supremacy. There is no room for intolerance. There is no room for people who believe that they are better than somebody else because of the color of their skin. And so, you know, there is no room for white supremacy, and I condemn them, as I have, in the strongest terms possible. But we need to do more when it comes to justice and equality. We need to make sure that we're fighting for things like the Justice Act in the United States Senate. We need to make sure that we continue funding historically black colleges and universities like I did mandatory funding just this past year. We can do these things to end the injustice, the inequality, and make a difference. But we have to make sure that we speak loudly, as I always have and will continue to do, to stand against hate, to stand against discrimination, to stand against white supremacy.
Which brings us to our next line of questioning, and these are quick yes or no's again. Do you condemn white supremacist groups? Mr. Hickenlooper?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you both. Do you condemn the plot to kidnap and kill Governor Gretchen Whitmer? Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Hickenlooper?
Yes.
Do you believe President Trump's words have inspired domestic terrorism? Yes or no? Mr. Hickenlooper?
Quite possibly, yes.
Mr. Gardner?
I sure hope not, no.
Thank you. All right. We are going to move on. Now, Colorado's relied on all mail-in ballots since 2014. Both of you have been elected during all-mail elections. Do you have faith in Colorado's election system? Mr. Hickenlooper, we'll start with you.
Yes, I helped create it. Really, it was the clerks from around the state, Republicans and Democrats, who created our all-mail ballot. It is a national model, and we've demonstrated that we've been able to have high turnout at a lower cost. We save $6 per voter. And at the same time we're doing that, we have limiting audits that we do throughout the balloting to demonstrate that we have no more questionable ballots than in any other traditional election. Now, within all this, Donald Trump continues to attack, especially states like Colorado, where we send ballots to everyone. Donald Trump thinks this is going to be the unfair election. It's going to make him allow him not to accept the results in some way. And Cory Gardner hasn't said a word. We were the second highest turnout in 2018. It's more accurate, and certainly in a time of COVID, it's safer. So I would certainly hope that Cory, when he gets a chance to talk to President Trump again, that he expresses how important it is that states like Colorado are the national model.
Well, and Mr. Gardner, the same question to you. Do you have faith in Colorado's election system?
Oh, yes, and I've talked about that around the country to reporters and to the president himself. In fact, the Denver Post had to correct itself in a story today because they got it wrong about my defense of Colorado's mailing system. Now, where I am concerned, and it's something that John Hickenlooper has said he supports, is what Washington, D.C. wants to do to take over and federalize our state's elections systems. A bill that John Hickenlooper supports would actually eliminate the voter signature verification on ballots. We do a great job in Colorado. Our signatures are verified. Let's stick with that. But that's not the bill that John Hickenlooper supports, that he says he would support if he were elected to the United States Senate. That bill would also allow the Attorney General of the United States to overturn a local county clerk decision. I think he just credited the county clerks for doing a great job. They do a wonderful job in Colorado, and yet he supports a bill that would allow the Attorney General to federalize their decisions. Let's fight hard for Colorado, but you can hear that two sets of rules that John Hickenlooper applies. He says one thing here, but does an exact different thing in Washington.
Let you respond to that.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what bill he's talking about. Again, in the course of a campaign, we hear about all kinds of bills, and oftentimes you're not supporting a bill as much as you're supporting an aspect of a bill. and then that gets lumped into a larger bill. So I'm not sure what he's talking about. I do think if he's talking to President Trump, he should be a lot more explicit that having an all-mail ballot where everyone gets sent a ballot to their home is highly efficient, increases turnout, lowers cost, and is safe in a time of COVID. So the fact that President Trump continues to make these allegations is frustrating.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to give you each 30 seconds to answer this follow-up question. Do you trust the election system in states which are using mail ballots for the first time? And do you promise tonight to accept the outcome of the presidential election? Mr. Gardner, you first.
Well, yes, of course. That's what we do in a democracy, a republic. We accept the results of an election, the outcome. And I hope that the states that are doing this for the first time are following Colorado's lead. If they follow Colorado's lead, it's going to be perfect. And I'm sure they have strengths and safeguards that they themselves have implemented in as well. And I know clerks and secretaries of state across the country are working hard to make this safe and secure. I'm proud of the work that our secretaries of state do across the country, that our county clerks do across the country. Let's make sure that we're learning from the best. I believe that's Colorado. Let's implement the things that we've done.
Thank you. And Mr. Hickenlooper, do you trust the election system in states which are using mail ballots for the first time?
Yes.
And do you promise to accept the outcome?
To the best of my knowledge, I do trust all those results, and I will accept the outcomes. I do, again, find it troubling that President Trump continues to attack these systems and is obviously building a foundation by which he's going to allege all kinds of improprieties and unfairness. And except an occasional comment to a local reporter, we don't hear Cory Gardner on national cable or in national print talking about that the president is wrong here. And this is a classic case where you've got to call out, speak back to power.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen, we are going to turn our attention to the issue of climate change, and Justin Wingirter will begin our questioning.
Thank you, Ann. Large portions of the state are dealing with extreme drought. Wildfires have burned nearly 500 square miles. Smoke has made it dangerous to breathe in Denver and elsewhere. You both have said the climate is changing. Let's begin with yes or no. Do you accept a scientific consensus that climate change is primarily due to human activity? Mr. Gardner will begin. Mr. Hickenlooper?
Yes.
Mr. Hickenlooper, you have said you want to transition away from fracking. This came up earlier in the debate. Your critics say that will leave many thousands of Coloradans without a job. Are they right about that?
Well, this is a transition that's going to take a significant period of time, and that transition is going to be 3, 4, 5 times more jobs created as we transition to a clean energy economy than we're going to lose from the old economy.
Mr. Gardner, you have made those accusations. Your response.
John Hickenlooper just admitted that if you work in oil and gas, he is going to take your job. 230,000 Coloradans are going to lose your job because he has decided your job isn't good enough for him. John, it's not about you. It's about the people of Colorado. It's about fighting for somebody who wants to have that job, who values that job, who values the work that they are bringing. I spoke to a person in Craig, Colorado, who asked me a very simple question. You ran TV ads about closing down coal mines in Craig, Colorado, bragging about the hundreds of people who lost their job, spiking the football that they had lost their job. He looked at me and he said, what have I done wrong? What did I do wrong to lose my job for the government to tell me that I'm not worthy of this job? You want to put them out of work. You've told them that your decision-making is better than their own.
Mr. Hickenlooper, please.
That is outrageous. I certainly said nothing of the kind. And the bottom line is market forces are changing our energy economy. We're in the process right now of closing 2 coal-fired plants down by Pueblo and replacing them with wind, solar, and batteries. And for the first time, the prices, the monthly electric bill for the consumers is going to go down. Right? Now, all of a sudden, we have clean energy and clean air at a lower cost. And that's going to happen again and again and again. The challenge, as any economy changes, is how do you make sure that you have the skills, training, the support, and get out ahead of it instead of, well, just denying, which is what Cory Gardner's done and what President Trump has done relentlessly. You've got to get out ahead and make sure that you have the skills training to make sure people get into new economies and make sure that we provide incentives to get more jobs in those rural places where they're needed. We created Jumpstart Colorado to do just that. And I think those are the kinds of efforts that are going to make a difference, not what Washington's doing, which is just grinding to a halt and stopping all progress around clean energy.
Mr. Gardner, is the closure of 2 coal plants a good thing in your mind?
I don't think anytime you lose jobs, it's a good thing. If they're going to move to clean energy jobs right now and have a job to get to, then yes, absolutely. It's a good thing that we have those jobs. But what Governor Hickenlooper has said is that they're going to lose their job. 230,000 people. He didn't ask them. He didn't talk to them. He didn't ask if it was okay for them to be fired. He just said, no, we're going to take them. You're going to lose them. We're going to create some government program for you, and we'll transition you into a different job, whether or not you want it or not. That is that command and control aspect that he wants to take to Washington of our economy, because he thinks Washington is best. Now, you said that I've denied. Governor, this is the most negative campaign that you have ever run. You want to talk about name calling? How many names have you called me tonight? Horse, whatever you call it. You've called me all kinds of names. And, you know, again, it goes back to the people of this state who deserve more, who deserve somebody who's going to fight for them, to champion their job. You want to have it two ways, one in Washington, one here. None of them are about the people of Colorado.
Would you like to respond, Mr. Hickenlooper?
Oh, you bet. I know what it's like to be laid off. I was laid off in that recession in the mid-1980s. I was out of work over 2 years. And it is no fun. I get that. And you've got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You've got to work with your friends and your neighbors and be able to deal what you can. You know, Cory's worried about my, I didn't call him any names tonight. I said his bill had been called horse excrement by others. The bottom line is that, you know, I got so many lies thrown at me this election, I figured it was about time to tell the truth about Cory.
All right, gentlemen, we are going to take a break. We will regroup and be right back after this commercial break.
So very decisive second part of the debate as we head in for another break. So far, pretty long debate, but I will also say that we are dealing with a pretty spicy debate here, and in particular with the denouncing of the Proud Boys. I
with
think
your constituents
that
and how
Cory
so.
handled
Mr.
himself
Hickenlooper,
well,
you
and
can
so
begin.
far he's been.
So thank you, Julie. That's a good question.
Sowing the seeds of doubt
I'm
about
proud of my 8
Hickenlooper's
years
corruptness.
as governor. I went
That's a
all
good
over
thing
the
for
state.
him.
I tried to get to every geographic corner there was, and I tried to meet with every group. And I'm not sure we were always successful at that, but I've taken the town hall pledge, and I pledged to do at least 4 town halls every year, and to make sure that those town halls are accessible to all different constituencies, and make sure that we get to as broad a diversity of Colorado as we possibly can. I think that, you know, my one commitment is to make sure that there will never be a cardboard hick. As you know, Senator Gardner had, there were a number of years over the health care issues and his willingness to try and get rid of the Affordable Care Act, to get rid of the protections for people with pre-existing conditions. He really didn't do any town hall meetings for a number of years. I want to be just the opposite. I want to over-deliver in terms of town hall meetings.
Mr. Gardner, how will you change the way you interact with your constituents?
Well, you might want to try a cardboard, because I think it's better looking and a lot taller than I am. So it's added that to the benefit. Look, we try every way possible to meet with constituents, and we change constantly the ways that we're doing it to make it more effective. It's town halls, it's teletown halls, it's Main Street walks, it's community meetings, it's trying to have online chat sessions and phone calls and engagements and employee town halls. Across the state of Colorado, we have done that over and over again, and I will continue to do that. I want to make sure that all 4 corners are heard. I fought hard to make sure that our minority communities had access to more funding, and that came from listening to minority communities, concessionaires at DIA, minority concessionaires at DIA that weren't getting the access they need, to make sure that we have unbanked and underbanked communities get the access that they need to our financial resources. That came through Zoom engagements over the last several months during the middle of a pandemic. But John, while you went to the 4 corners of the state, do you remember calling the people of rural Colorado backwards?
All right, gentlemen, unless you want to respond, I'll give you 30 seconds.
No, I mean, it's 10 years old. It's totally out of context. It took place.
All right,
a whole different circumstance.
We will move on then. Caitlin Kim continues our questions.
Thank you, Ann. Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court caused speculation about the future of Roe v. Wade. But here in Colorado, it's voters who will decide on whether to ban abortions after 22 weeks. I would like to know if you support this proposed ban. Mr. Gardner, we'll start with you.
I'm a pro-life candidate, and I support the initiative.
Okay. Mr. Hickenlooper?
Same question. I believe a woman has a basic right to control her own body and to decide the health care that she receives. I think she should have broad access to the tools that allow her to make the right decisions for her and who she is. While I was governor, we worked very hard. We had the family planning initiative where we reached out and provided long-acting reversible contraception to over 30,000 young women between the ages of 15 and 25. And we reduced unintended pregnancies by 54%. We reduced abortions by 64%. Healthcare is a right. It's not a privilege. Women have an absolute right to the healthcare of their own bodies. We don't want to put government between a woman and her doctor.
All right. Thank you. Justin Wingirter has our next question.
Would you mind if I add a little bit? Because I thought that was a yes or no question. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
I apologize. Look, we need to stop the politics and the partisanship of this debate. One of the bills I've introduced is a bill called the over-the-counter prescription legislation. It would make sure that we allow 24-hour, 7-day-a-week access to birth control. It takes the politics out of this debate. It's no longer a fight about Roe versus Wade. It's about giving people the power to make the best decisions.
Thank you. All right, Justin?
Wait, can I respond to that since he was supposed to go first? Very quickly. You know, that doesn't in any way lower the cost of birth control, which is, for many people is prohibitively expensive. But by making it over the counter, it means that women who are getting coverage through Medicaid no longer can get that birth control. And I think that's, you know, that it's taking the choice away from women rather than expanding their options.
Do you oppose over-the-counter birth control?
We are going to move on now. Thank you. Justin?
Thank you. The greatest share of Colorado's voters are now registered as unaffiliated. And so I want to hear from both of you. What is your party failing to do that people increasingly seem to not want to belong to it? We'll begin, with Mr. Hickenlooper.
Well, I think, I mean, my goal has always been to try and represent all Coloradans. When I first ran for mayor of Denver, you know, the suburbs hated Denver and Denver hated the suburbs. And I went out there and said I was going to, if I was elected mayor of Denver, I would work to raise up the entire metropolitan area. And I did that. Denver Water reduced per capita consumption by 20% within 5 years to make sure there was more water, not just for the suburbs, but for farmers and ranchers. I wanted to get people to work together with our water plan. We created the first water plan in the history of Colorado. We got over 30,000 people to work on that water plan. They were Republicans, they were Democrats, they were independents. And I think that should be a better goal of government, is to find those ways where you can build bridges and alliances, like we did with the environmental community and the oil and gas industry, to create the first methane regulations in the country. Methane's 80 times worse than CO2 for climate change, and we were the first state to get it done by getting people to work together, Republicans and Democrats.
Mr. Gardner, same question?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's about respect. I think it's about respecting ideas and differences of opinions. It's about listening. It's about working together for goals that we can achieve and accomplishments. If you go into my office, any of my offices, I have a mission statement on the wall that talks about the answer is yes. Now, how can we work together to get there? And now maybe we're not always going to agree. Now, maybe at the end of the day, we're not able to achieve what it is that we set out to achieve or tried to achieve, but we're going to work our darndest to make sure that we get the job done for the people of Colorado. It's why the Great American Outdoors Act is the biggest, most successful, important investment in public lands in the history of our country. Why it's as big as something Teddy Roosevelt envisioned when he created our national park system. That's bringing together the ideas of disparate corners to make sure that we can hear from everyone and not just act on some. It's important that we continue to do that. But again, what you hear tonight is somebody who sets out two sets of rules. He brags about bringing oil and gas together, but then he brags about putting them all out of work.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Can I respond to that? I mean,
30 seconds.
He talks about this Great American Outdoors Act, which he voted twice, 2 different times, to take funding away from the National Park Service. Now he wants to give it back. He wants to claim himself as an environmentalist because he was able to convince Mitch McConnell to throw him a bone, a bill that was supported by every single Democratic senator there was. But he still won't support the CORE Act. The CORE Act is protections for 400,000 acres in 9 counties, and the county commissioners in which that land is located have all supported it. Cory promised to back it, and then he turns it back and changes his mind.
I'd like to address that if I could. Thank you. John, can you name the 4 parts of the CORE Act?
The four which?
The 4 parts of the Core Act, the bill. Do you know the bill? What are the 4 parts of the Core Act?
You know what? We're going to move on.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know.
Okay, because we have 15 minutes left here, or 14 minutes left here, so we still have a lot of territory.
Yeah, the mods are so
earlier this
biased
week,
against
Justices
Gardner.
Thomas
Are you kidding
and
me? They
Alito
just
wrote
let him
that
get
the
away
Supreme
with
Court
that,
case legalizing
dodged
gay
question
marriage
there.
was incorrectly decided and damaging to religious liberty under the First Amendment. Many in the LGBT community are concerned the court might try to overturn its own ruling. Do you believe marriage equality is the settled law of the land or an issue the Supreme Court should revisit? Mr. Gardner.
I think it's a settled law of the land as the Supreme Court has ruled.
Thank you. Mr. Hickenlooper?
So he's cucked on gay marriage.
Yes, and I was involved in those struggles while I was governor.
To keep optics.
And heard many of the stories of how people's lives were impacted by the status quo, the inequality. And to finally get that settled is just changed the lives for so many Coloradans, so many Americans. And I certainly hope it is a settled law of the land, although certainly with the rush to confirm Amy Coney Barrett, one has to be concerned about some of these things that we thought had been settled and well taken care of.
We're going to go to some yes or no questions here now, gentlemen. Do you support a pathway to citizenship for all undocumented people, not just dreamers? Mr. Hickenlooper.
Yes, I do.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes, I believe we can get there, and we should.
Thank you. Do you support legalization of recreational marijuana at the federal level? Mr. Gardner?
I've worked hard to make this conflict go away, to allow states' legalization to occur. Yes, the answer is yes. Governor Hickenlooper actually vetoed marijuana legislation.
We will ask Mr. Hickenlooper, do you support legalization of recreational marijuana at the federal level?
Yes, we have to decriminalize it at the federal level.
Wow.
Do you support raising the federal minimum wage to...
Both are for weed, and Gardner cucked on DACA. What a freaking idiot. I wonder if this is just based on the polls or if he's a cuck rhino. I don't know. Might have to do a video on him if he wins re-election maybe. But, yeah, so I think cucking on DACA is a pretty key a telltale sign that a Republican is losing an election probably. We look at certain people in California that are cooking on DACA in order to win over purple voters, independent voters. And I kind of get that. But unfortunately, I don't like senators that are pro-amnesty to any capacity. But again, if this is a way to win, I guess it's a way to win. And it's worth it over having a super pro-DACA Hickenlooper. And both of these guys, being from Colorado, are pro-weed, even though I bet you that if Gardner were not in Colorado, he'd be against it. But this just goes to show the flip-flopping of either party based on whether or not they're going to win the election or not, statistically speaking. So let's see their position on the minimum wage.
$15 an hour. Mr. Hickenlooper.
Over a period of time and regionally allocated, yes, we should get to $15 of national policy, yes.
Mr. Gardner?
We should get to $15 an hour by growing our economy. Reports have already shown how
So
many
you don't
millions...
believe we should raise the minimum wage?
We should get to $15 and more through our economy, by growing our economy.
Thank
The
you.
reports
Thank
have said
you.
we'll lose millions of
We have a
jobs
new
if you do what John
question for you.
Hickenlooper wants to do.
Thank you. Should William Perry Penley still be in leadership at the Bureau of Land Management? Mr. Gardner?
Oh, he hasn't been confirmed, hasn't had a hearing yet.
Should he still be in a leadership role?
Well, he's not been confirmed, and the courts had said he's not.
That's not the question, sir. He
Well,
has
we
been
have to have a
working
hearing.
there.
We have to have a hearing on this.
All right, Mr. Hickenlooper, should he still be in a leadership role?
No, of course not. And he's making decisions that
Thank you.
he shouldn't be making.
Do you support cities setting up designated camping areas for unhoused people? Mr. Hickenlooper.
Each city has to make their own decision on that, but I do support better, more affordable housing.
That's a yes. So yes to setting up designated camping areas.
Yes, that's local control.
Mr. Gardner?
Well, if the communities agree to that, yes. John Hickenlooper promised to eliminate homelessness, and he didn't do it.
Do you support the idea of term limits for senators? Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Hickenlooper?
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Should law enforcement officers have qualified immunity? Mr. Hickenlooper?
Yeah, we proved in Colorado that can be negotiated.
This is a yes or no, Mr. Gardner?
Yes, but we have to come together as a community to get it right.
Thank you. We do live in a moment when privately owned social media platforms have a huge amount of power over our public conversation. Think of Facebook banning conspiracy theory groups or Twitter fact-checking the president's tweets. How do you balance protecting the freedom of speech and free enterprise against the potentially negative consequences of allowing conspiracy theories and falsehoods to spread unchecked? Mr. Hickenlooper, you first.
Well, we've got to recognize that this is a serious, serious challenge. We've never seen the immense power concentrated in such a few number of media outlets. And we've never seen before foreign governments intruding into our elections, into our negotiations of business. And by all means, we have to make sure that we are able to recognize in a country that's based on free speech and individual rights, we've got to make sure that those rights are protected, but at the same time that those freedoms can't be used to harm our democracy or take us apart. So absolutely, there have to be a recognition of limits here and standards that we can set for, what is real and what is propaganda or lies.
Mr. Gardner, same question to you.
Well, look, we have to be very aware of censorship that takes place, censorship of ideas, whether it's on the left or the right. And I am very concerned that 2,000 censors in San Francisco may create that kind of censorship that is against freedom of speech. Perhaps the only thing worse than 2,000 censors in San Francisco is 2,000 censors in Washington, D.C. Mistruths, half-truths, deceit, lies, we can't allow that to happen, and we have to make sure that we hold the businesses accountable to do it. That's why we need to look at Section 230 to make sure that we're holding people accountable for outright lies and foreign interference to make sure that it doesn't happen. But we cannot allow speech, whether that's left or right, to be censored. And that's what you're starting to see. People who are put in the Twitter jail room because they have put forward an idea that somebody in San Francisco disagrees with. Now, Governor Hickenlooper speaks of foreign interference, yet he just recently said China isn't anything to be worried about. They don't want to dominate the world. That's exactly what we're dealing with. The concerns of a country like China, who very much is trying to interfere in our election.
Thank you very much. Now, gentlemen, our viewers have overwhelmingly wanted us to keep things positive tonight. They say they're sick of the negativity and divisiveness. So if you had to give yourself a grade, A being most positive campaign, F being the most negative, how do you think you've done in 2020? And Mr. Gardner, you get to start.
Well, look, I'm not going to grade myself. The people of Colorado will be doing that soon enough. But I believe there's optimism in every vale and valley in this country. And that's why I have co-sponsored and passed into law more legislation than the entire Colorado congressional delegation because of that belief in the people of Colorado, the optimism that our pioneers brought with us. It's why I'm the third most bipartisan member of the United States Senate, because I work together for and on behalf of the people of Colorado. And what you've seen tonight, what you've seen is a clear difference between two people who hope to lead at least one seat in the United States Senate. And there is a strong difference between the two of us. It's a difference of ideas. It's a difference of putting the people of Colorado first. It's a difference of believing in a person's ability to choose their own job and to stay in that job because they like it and they want to fight for their family. I'm from a little tiny town out in the eastern plains of Colorado. And people wouldn't be there but for the positivity and the optimism that Colorado brings, because it's a tough life in farming and agriculture. And that's why, while we may contrast, we still believe in this state.
Thank you. Mr. Hickenlooper.
I would have a hard time giving myself a grade as well. But if I was, I mean, you have to make these decisions. I'd give myself a B. I really thought I would get through this campaign without doing any negative ads or any even contrast ads. I was elected mayor of Denver twice and elected governor twice and managed to do that in pretty tough elections. But once it got to $20 million of attack ads, so much of it distortions and lies and exaggerations, I figured they're spending that much money telling lies about me. I needed to go back and tell the truth about Cory Gardner and point out that he has been rolling back, he's voted 9 times to get rid of the protections for people with pre-existing medical conditions. He's voted, to put a coal lobbyist in charge of the EPA, roll back the protections for clean air, clean water. Donald Trump says that Cory Gardner supported me 100% of the time. The Amy Coney Barrett nomination. He said, Cory, you've got to get in line. 6 hours later, Cory was at the microphone. I think we need to tell both sides of the story.
Thank you, thank you. All right, gentlemen, we have allowed and we've agreed that each of you will get 60 seconds for a closing statement. So we want to do that now. So Mr. Gardner, you get to go first.
Well, thank you. As I mentioned before, I believe in the power of Colorado. I believe in the people of Colorado, that this state is a four-corner state made incredible by Pikes Peak and Longs Peak and the Burlington Carousel and Craig, Colorados, and the Grand Junctions and everywhere in between. I'm the only statewide elected official who doesn't live within 30 miles of Denver. I'm the only statewide elected official from rural Colorado. I believe that I-70 doesn't end at Vail. I believe that I-70 doesn't end at Strasburg, that there's more to the state, and that we have to fight for opportunity for every single position and every single corner, and that's exactly what I have done over the last 6 years, and I'd be honored to earn your vote because that's exactly what I will do the next 6 years, to make sure that we create more opportunity, not less, to make sure that we have a cleaner environment, not worse, to make sure that we have that optimism to climb that next peak, to reach that next horizon, because that's who we are in Colorado. That's what we do. And to the rest of the country, when it comes to Colorado, you ain't seen nothing yet. The best is still to come from us.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Mr. Hickenlooper?
Well, thank you, Caitlin, Ann, and Justin. Channel 7, thank you for the opportunity. As I predicted at the beginning, we saw a barrage of attacks from Cory Gardner, of exaggerations and lies and distortions. But I think most of you saw through this. And we have to recognize we have, the stakes are so high, we have to make difficult decisions. Are we going to protect health care for people with pre-existing conditions, or are we going to take it away? Are we going to address climate change head on and protect our environment? Or are we going to continue to roll back clean air and clean water protections? Are we going to give more trillion-dollar giveaways to the wealthiest corporations and individuals? Or are we going to rebuild our economy that's more fair to everyone? Are we going to have a senator who stands with Donald Trump 100% of the time, or one who stands up for Colorado? Listen, nothing's going to change nothing's going to change in Washington if we don't change it. And that's why I'm asking for your support, why I want your vote. Together, we can change Washington. Thank you so much.
And thank you both. And we want to thank everyone watching, everyone who...
So as you can see there, that's the conclusion of the debate, more or less. Yeah, so this was a more entertaining debate than I thought it was going to be. It was longer than you would think it would be. Also, this is a top 8, maybe, yeah, definitely a top 10 Senate race to observe. And as you can see right now, this went for over an hour, believe it or not. And you can see very obviously that although Cory Gardner is in a weak position right now as an incumbent in a likely blue state, he is still decent enough in debate to hold his own against Sleepy John Hickenlooper, right? He looks old. Anyway, right now I just see that we have a center-right Republican in a moderately blue state going against a moderately blue candidate, and I just frankly think that the moderate blue candidate would win, and it's suiting up for Hickenlooper to win by 4%, in my opinion. It could range anywhere from like 2 to 10%, I don't know, but the point is that Hickenlooper's probably going to win. And sure, I do think that Cory Gardner increases odds by 2%, but this was not the victory he needed, and this did not move the needle nearly enough to where he would be in even a 50-50 shot of winning. So this is kind of a pathetic debate in terms of the outcome. And while this was a little more direct, and you can see the desperation in Cory Gardner as he's filibustering for time and he's trying to grasp at minutes in the debate, which I frankly would do too if I were in his position, but it just kind of shows how desperate he is. And again, the mods, of course, were tilted to the left. Have I not? You at best you get moderators that do not interject. But Jesus Christ, have I not seen a debate in a long time where the moderators were right-leaning in any way, really? So again, the moderators were unfavorable to Cory Gardner, but what are you to expect? Hickenlooper more or less held on his own, even though he has done some deplorable things like appointing a judge who was covering up a cocaine trafficking scheme, and somehow Cory Gardner did not completely nail him to the board on that. So, pretty weird. I was expecting both of these candidates to do subpar, and I think that Cory Gardner did above average, maybe a little bit, so 5.5 for Cory Gardner, and I would say that John Hickenlooper did a 4 out of 10. I do think Cory Gardner, if he wanted to win this race, should have performed at an 8 at least. He should have really blown Hickenlooper out of the water, but it just clearly did not happen here, so it's truly unfortunate, and you have nobody to blame but him and kind of the moderators as well. So I think I'm going to project that the victor of this election for Senate in Colorado is going to be John Hickenlooper, unfortunately for the Republicans. Anyways, guys, subscribe to the video if you have subscribe to the channel if you have not. Comment down below who won in the debate and whether or not you will keep watching these debate reviews, kind of recaps and or commentaries, because I am trying to cover as much about this election as I possibly can, frankly, because I think this will be important for posterity and kind of for you guys to see minute by minute what's really going to be of consequence in the future in terms of whether or not a debate will make or break a candidate. And in a purple state like the Senate in Colorado, you're going to see a interesting debate, and I guess you just saw one. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.